a lot of so-called pro-black men today like to push the totally unfounded and nonsensical belief or rhetoric that blacks of America are the descendants of the ancient Egyptians, and they do it based off of the premise that they were black and we're black, so we must be the Egyptians. No, that's not how it works. There are thousands of different tribes in Africa. There are thousands of different tribes of color across the world. You can't just pick the ancient Egyptians. It doesn't work like that. That's one of the ways that they're telling you that the version of history that's studied in schools is totally fabricated. It's not true. All right. And the things that we're taught about the medieval time period and the age of slavery and things like that, the majority is either fabricated or highly exaggerated. They did not bring 50 million so-called black people just from one small location on the west coast of Africa on sailboats. All right, brothers, it didn't go down like that.
Who is Ankh's crack pipe? Who is Ankh's crack pipe? Who is Ankh's crack pipe?
Me, I'm a powerful activist out there.
Yes, the majority of blacks here in the Americas came from Europe, and we came here during the Middle Ages, or you had a lot of so-called black people who came here from Assyria after the Assyrian captivity, and we were known as Incas and Aztecs and Mayans because those people were so-called black people. All right, as were most of the so-called Native American tribes, particularly along the East Coast, east of the Mississippi. All right, now you had the Native Americans of the plains, what they call the Plains Indians. They were mostly Mongoloid, but the so-called natives east of the Mississippi were predominantly quote-unquote Negroid. Right, and then you had tribes that were kind of a mixture of the two, but the Mayans, the Aztecs, and the Incas and Tainos, etc., were all so-called Negro, quote unquote. All right, but yes, that's why a lot of you brothers have a hard time understanding it, because they've gone to great pains to do things like this, which is known as typification, or I believe it's called iconoclasm also, where they take a lot of the ancient depictions, and you see that a lot with what was called the Russian icons or the Byzantine icons. They totally paint over them to make them appear Caucasian. All right, so let's see what they do with this.
So Indiana Jones, that last scene when the Ark of the Covenant is shuttled away, never know what's in those museum warehouses. Treasures.
Their own collection.
Their own collection, right?
I would have thrown away a crumpled up paper bag. You would have opened it up.
I get it. Shroud.
I get it.
You never know where you might find a shroud.
That's right. Coming up next.
But that's the point. Like even she just touched on at the end of the film Indiana Jones, and they put that in there on purpose when they rolled the Ark of the Covenant in there. And the Caucasian man does not have the Ark of the Covenant. But anyway, they rolled the Ark in there in the movie into the warehouse, and it's just in there with a bunch of other artifacts. So that's one of the ways that they're telling you that the version of history that's studied in schools is totally fabricated. It's not true. All right. And Lord willing, when I start to do the series on the Middle Ages, you're going to see that the things that we're taught about the medieval time period and the age of slavery and things like that. The majority is either fabricated or highly exaggerated. They did not bring 50 million so-called black people just from one small location on the west coast of Africa on sailboats. All right, brothers, it didn't go down like that. But anyway, so now just continuing on from the previous segment, I just wanted to bring out this story that was also on the morning news, because a lot of so-called black men today, especially a lot of so-called pro-black men today, like to push the totally unfounded and nonsensical belief or rhetoric that blacks of America are the descendants of the ancient Egyptians, and they do it based off of the premise that they were black and we're black, so we must be the Egyptians. No, that's not how it works. There are thousands of different tribes in Africa. There are thousands of different tribes of color across the world. You can't just pick the ancient Egyptians. It doesn't work like that. But this feature is going to show you who the descendants of the actual ancient Egyptians are. All right. They're known as the Nilotic peoples, Nilotic, the Nilotic peoples. All right, particularly the Maasai and the Dinka tribe, Dinka, and the Watusi tribe. Those are the descendants of the ancient Egyptians. Right now, you have other tribes like the Nuer tribe, Nuer, and a lot of other tribes that are the descendants of the ancient Egyptians, and also are the descendants of the ancient Cushites. All right, they're known today as the Nilotic peoples. Right, they live in the Great Lakes region in so-called Africa, around Kenya, the Sudan, Tanzania, Chad, etc., around that area. All right, so we're going to see who those people are today.
In the 3 years since Rach, Matt and Goy last saw their mother, they have grown a lot taller. Today...
Now, let me say this. Notice she said that they've grown a lot taller. The ancient Egyptians were known for their great height. All right. Like if you read the scriptures, it tells you about the height of the ancient Egyptians. It tells you about the height of the Philistines. The Philistines were the kin of the ancient Egyptians. All right. Like you have the Dinka tribe today, the Watusi tribe. They're known for being 7-8 feet tall. All right. Those are the descendants of the ancient Egyptians. See, now this is something that's very important for the so-called black man of the Americas to understand, because of a lot of these so-called pro-black or Afrocentric teachings, they get caught up in a lot of this stuff. Just because a nation of people are extremely dark and have, you know, that look similar to blacks of the captivity of the Western society, it doesn't make them the same people. The same way that if you walk up to a Japanese man and you tell him that he's the same as a Chinese man, he'll tell you, no, I'm not. Right? If you walk up to an East Indian man and you tell him that he's the same as an Arabic man because they look similar, he'll tell you, no, I'm not. But once again, that goes back to the premise that I stated, that so-called blacks, you know, here in the Americas, we have no culture. So we're trying to grab on and graft into some other culture that we find to be illustrious. All right. But if you want to know who the Egyptians are today, like think of the basketball player Manute Bol, right? He was a descendant of the ancient Egyptians. Or the basketball player with the Lakers, Luol Deng, right? Those are the descendants of the ancient Egyptians. All right, they will tell you that they're African. They won't tell you that they're black, and they'll give you their tribe. All right, because that's what you do when you have a real culture. You don't give your race as a skin color. Right now, the ancient Egyptians were pushed down into the interiors of so-called Africa when they were conquered by the Assyrians, the Babylonians, and then the Greeks and the Romans. They got pushed down into the interior, and then that land was finally conquered by the Arabs, and then lastly the Ottoman Turks. All right, that's why the people look how they look today up in that land of Egypt, and even still today in Egypt, you still have people who are very, very dark, because you know originally these were the people that were in the land. These guys that you see right now in the screen, they were the original inhabitants. Now, if you saw these people in the street, you would know it instantly that they're so-called Africans. You would know that they're not so-called blacks of the captivity, just because they're dark-skinned. You know, they look different.
Pain themselves.
Now, the white man tells you, well, that's true. They look different because your ancestors were raped by our ancestors, or you know, black women slept with white men. That's a false narrative. That's phony. All right. But anyway, that was the point of the video. Just to show you off of the first part when we saw the fictitious depiction of an ancient Egyptian or whoever that was, maybe a Ptolemaic dynasty noble who was a part Caucasian and part native heritage, but to how the ancient Egyptians actually looked. All right. And who their descendants actually are. All right. So peace.